Just a quick message to the low IQ individuals who are going to comment on this video talking about how I have an agenda against Wan-Bissaka and Varane. Before you regurgitate buzzwords you've seen on Twitter, I want you to answer this question. If we had a time machine and we could go back to the start of August, would you swap Luke Shaw, Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Raphael Varane for Theo Hernandez, Benjamin Pavard and Jean-Claire Todibo? If you say no, your transfer strategy is just as bad as United's at this current point, and I'll tell you why. But before I go any further, are you looking to dramatically improve your fantasy football point score from last season? Well, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Fantasy Football Fix, which is the perfect tool for anyone who wants to get the best possible start to this FPL season, as they provide an Elite 11 team reveal which allows you to track fantasy football's greatest ever managers in real time, with over 82 top 10,000 and 61 top 5,000 finishes. And just in my opinion, if you're not using this and someone else is, you're at a massive disadvantage. But not just that, Fantasy Football Fix also allows you to see the pre-deadline captain ownership data. The assistant manager tool also allows you to unlock transfer optimization, and you can also get predicted prices data to potentially get an advantage in the long run by increasing your team's overall value. And alongside this, they also have stats from Opta, they have predicted player points and much more. And I personally will definitely be using Fantasy Football Fix, and I'll be setting up my own fantasy football league, so I'll put a code somewhere either on the screen or in the description. So not only can you join my league, but you can also use Fantasy Football Fix to try to beat me as well. And so I'll leave it linked in the description for you to go to after this video. So before I come on to why keeping Varane, Wan-Bissaka and Shaw in this scenario would be nonsensical, let me just explain to everyone how in financial terms this would all make sense. So whilst I do like Wan-Bissaka as a fullback, I've said that many times, particularly defensively, I just don't think he's exactly what Ten Hag wants in a fullback. And he also has 1 year left on his contract, which means unless United offer him a new contract, which I don't think would be a good idea, he's going to leave on a free next summer anyway. And given that he is a highly regarded fullback, proven at the top level and is a homegrown player, United probably could have got at least £35 million for him. The same goes for Luke Shaw, who I'm also a fan of, but he's 28 approaching 29, and for me Luke Shaw's just one of those players who I can see declining rapidly as he gets into his early 30s, and so it seems like the perfect time for United to sell. Raphael Varane, apparently there was an offer from Saudi Arabia for around £60 million, which is an absolutely incredible fee once you consider Varane's age and the fact that he's also incredibly injury prone. Add on to this the fact that I think there will be many players out there who would upgrade upon Raphael Varane in possession, suiting Ten Hag's system a lot more, then selling an injury prone 30-year-old who's on huge wages for between 50 and 60 million pounds seems like a no-brainer for any sensible club. And with Wan-Bissaka bringing in around 35 million, Luke Shaw probably also capable of bringing in around 35 as well, that would have allowed United to raise between 120 and 130 million pounds. Reinvesting this money, United could have got Pavard for around 25 million, Todibo for between 35 and 40 million, and I reckon they could have also got Theo Hernandez for between 60 and 65 million. Meaning that it would have been very possible for United to bring in Pavard, Todibo and Theo Hernandez for around the £130 million mark. And if you watch my recent video where I point out how the lack of inverted fullbacks is causing United massive defensive problems in midfield, having two incredibly versatile fullbacks who can play in multiple different roles would have allowed Ten Hag to be a lot more tactically versatile, not just throughout the season from game to game, but also in-game as well. Not to mention, Pavard, Todibo and Theo are all players who are still around their mid-20s who haven't yet hit their peak. The problem with Manchester United's transfer strategy is not just the recruitment side, or really the lack of recruitment. It's also their ability to sell players and not just the dead wood. Obviously we want to get rid of players like McTominay, Maguire, Donny van de Beek, Fred who's already gone. But the real key to a successful transfer strategy is not just selling players, but selling players at the right time and then using that money to reinvest and basically upgrade in those positions. But when you look at Manchester United over the last few years, one thing is clear: not only do United seemingly not sell players when they should, but they allow their value to completely degrade and end up selling these players when they're on a complete decline or pretty much worthless near the end of their contract. And we've seen this with players like Paul Pogba and Ander Herrera, and even players like Anthony Martial and Donny van de Beek, who are somehow still in United's squad, despite players who have been seemingly on the way out for the last few seasons. Despite the chaos going on over at Chelsea, one thing they do excellently is sell players at the right time, allowing them to get maximum price which can then be reinvested in their squad. Just look at Havertz and Mount as examples from this summer, and players like Eden Hazard and Alvaro Morata before them. United on the other hand seemingly only get rid of players when they've completely declined and no other club wants them. Just look at Donny van de Beek. Realistically, Van de Beek should have been sold in the summer of 2021, or at least in the summer of 2022, when it was clear he wasn't going to be able to break into this United side, and United could probably have recouped around 25 to 30 million pounds for him. However, now at this point in the transfer window, United will probably be lucky if they can get around 15 to 20 million for him. The same goes with Anthony Martial, who's going to leave on a free, and I can also see the same happening with players like McTominay and Maguire as well. But that's all in the past, as United can't really get any more than what these players are worth now. However, they can look to the future and start identifying specific players in the squad who in the near to mid future, who will likely have to be upgraded upon, but could be sold for significant amounts of money, and that money can then be used to sign players who are essentially upgrades, which improves United as a whole. And the three players I talked about are Raphael Varane, Wan-Bissaka and Luke Shaw, who I am happy to keep with the squad this season, but I think next summer United may have to move them on. The problem with Wan-Bissaka is that his contract expires at the end of the season, and so really United should have been thinking ahead and either extended his contract or sold him either this summer or preferably last summer for a large sum of money. But what's probably going to have to happen is United give Wan-Bissaka a new deal just as they did with Fred last season, which will retain his value and allow United to then sell him on next summer for between 30 to maybe as much as 40 million pounds. And the same goes for Luke Shaw, who, whilst I'm definitely a fan of Luke Shaw, I definitely think he can be improved. And given that he will be 29 years old by the end of the season, it seems like the perfect time to move him on. Luke Shaw just strikes me as a type of player who's not going to be able to retain this sort of form as he enters his early 30s, and I can see a decline coming, and so this is what United need to do. They need to anticipate when a player is going to decline and look to sell them when they're at their peak, and then use that money to invest in someone who's just as good or preferably even better. Luke Shaw, England's first choice left back, who by the end of the season will only be 29 years old, capable of playing as a left-sided centre back as well, also homegrown so that helps, and has a contract until 2027, should be able to bring in between 35 and 40 million pounds next summer, I'd anticipate. And so by selling Luke Shaw and Wan-Bissaka, United should be able to bring in around 70 to 75 million pounds. We'll go with the more conservative valuations and value both players at 35 million, which I think is reasonable, so you'd get in around 70 million. Now Raphael Varane next summer is not going to be able to bring in 60 million pounds just sheerly because of his age, but if Saudi Arabia are still interested, United should still be able to get around 40 million pounds. This is still around 110 million pounds, which can be reinvested and would definitely be enough to sign both Teo and Todibo. And with Pavard's contract at Bayern Munich expiring at the end of the season, maybe United could get him on a free and make up for the missed opportunity this summer. If he goes to Inter Milan or somewhere else or signs a new contract at Bayern, United will obviously have to look elsewhere, but it will still be great options out there. And so I think the main problem with the United board and a lot of United fans is that they're far too sentimental around players. I could maybe understand it with legends of the club like David De Gea, and players who have legend potential like Rashford and Fernandes, but with players like Wan-Bissaka, Shaw and Varane, whilst they are very good players, and they've certainly played very well for United, you can't just hold on to them because you like them as players. You've got to think sensible in the transfer market, and when players are getting to the last 1 or 2 years of their contract, or approaching their 30s, you've at least got to have some consideration about potentially moving them on. There's no point keeping players because they're fan favourites, and then eventually having to replace them in a season or two when their contract expires or they reach a decline. It just doesn't make any sense logically, especially for a club like United who are under significant budget restraints. So let me know if you agree with my opinion in the comment section below. You can sign up to my Patreon podcast, which will be linked in the description, along with some of my other videos as well, and click the bell when you subscribe to the channel so you do get notified when my videos come out.